It was raining just enough to keep people indoors, but not enough to silence the world. I liked days like that. Quiet, but not empty. The kind of quiet that felt honest. I had my usual corner seat at the small cafe across from the park. No laptop, just a book I wasn't reading and a coffee that had gone cold. That's when she rolled in. She moved with the kind of determination that made people look away. Not out of rudeness, more like guilt. As if watching someone do something simple with effort forced them to remember everything they took for granted. She didn't seem to care. Her wheels hummed a steady rhythm as she positioned herself at the table next to mine. I noticed her hands were shaking slightly as she adjusted the cup the barista brought over. I looked away, but not fast enough. "You can look," she said without meeting my eyes. "It's not contagious." There was no edge to it, just tired humor. I smiled because it felt like the right answer. She didn't. A minute passed, maybe more. Then, quietly, she said, "If I weren't different, you'd choose me." She didn't say it like a question. Didn't look at me when she said it either. It came out low, almost accidental, like she hadn't meant to say it aloud. I don't think she expected a response, but I gave her one. I already did. She turned then, not quickly. Her gaze was steady, like she was checking if I was joking or worse, pitying. I wasn't. I don't play with people's hearts like that. She seemed to know. "You don't even know me," she said, watching me now, less guarded. "I don't need to know everything to know I want to." A small crease formed between her eyebrows. "That's a dangerous sentence. Only if you're not ready for someone to mean it." She blinked slowly, like I'd said something in a language she hadn't heard in a long time. Then she laughed, soft and short, and shook her head. "You're not serious." "I usually am." Another silence settled, but this one was different. It didn't feel heavy. Just real. She glanced down at her cup and wrapped her hands around it like it might anchor her. "My name's Hannah," she said. "Lucas," I replied. We didn't shake hands. Didn't ask where the other was from or what they did or any of the things people normally say to fill space. We just sat there, breathing the same air, both trying to decide what to do with the quiet, now that it had become something else entirely. She broke it, finally. "You come here often?" I nodded. "Thursdays, mostly. Coffee's better than it should be. I come here when I need to not hear myself think. Is it working?" "Maybe. You talk just enough to drown out the noise in my head." I smiled, and she didn't look away this time. Outside, the rain kept falling, soft, persistent, familiar. Inside, something small but unshakable had shifted, and though neither of us moved, something in me leaned closer to her. She didn't know yet, but I had already chosen her. Long before she rolled in, long before she spoke, maybe even before I'd ever seen her. Some people just carry the shape of something you've been waiting for without knowing, and when they speak, it fits. The following Thursday, she was already there when I arrived. Same table, same cup, untouched. Her eyes scanned the street beyond the window like she was waiting for someone else, or maybe for a version of herself that never arrived. I didn't say anything right away. I just sat at my usual spot, ordered my coffee, and opened the same book I wasn't reading last time. It was a strange kind of comfort to return to something unchanged when the rest of life felt like it kept shifting without notice. She noticed me. I felt it. Not a look, not a nod, just presence, acknowledging presence. "You're late," she said, without turning. I didn't know we had a schedule. "We didn't. We do now." Her voice had that same quiet defiance. Not defensive, more like she needed to test how much space she was allowed to take up. I didn't mind. People like Hannah didn't ask for much, but they noticed everything. I smiled without looking up. Good to know. This time, she did turn. A softer expression. Less armor. "You always read the same book. I never get past the 3rd page. Why?" Maybe I'm waiting for the right reason to stop pretending. She studied me then, like she wasn't sure whether I was serious or just playing at being mysterious. I wasn't doing either. I just told her the truth. "What's it about?" she asked. "Loneliness, mostly." She nodded like she understood more than she let on. "Sounds familiar." I didn't press. Her chair creaked slightly as she shifted, adjusting the angle of her body like she was letting herself settle into the moment. That small movement felt like trust. We didn't speak for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't push, just allows. After some time, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. "I draw," she said, almost shyly. "Sometimes, when my hands cooperate. Can I see?" She hesitated, then passed it over. The pages were worn at the edges. Inside, sketches of windows, doorways, alleys, places that suggested more than they showed, each line deliberate, imperfect, alive. None of them had people in them. "They feel empty," I said. "They are," she replied. "That's the point." I flipped through slowly. "You ever draw people?" "Once." He left before I finished. "And now?" She looked at me, steady. "Now I draw places where I wouldn't be left." There was nothing I could say to that, not without making it smaller than it was, so I handed the notebook back, carefully. She tucked it away like it held something fragile. "You always this careful with people?" she asked. "Only when they matter?" She didn't answer, but something softened around her mouth, like she almost smiled, and then remembered she wasn't supposed to. We sat like that until the light outside began to shift. She didn't say she was leaving, just looked down at her hands for a moment, then back at me. "Same time next week? I'll be here." And just like that, we began to occupy the same space in time. Not as a plan, not as a promise, just as something that started to make sense. It was our fourth Thursday when she brought it up. Until then, everything had been quietly unfolding. Familiar smiles, unfinished stories, the soft rhythm of something choosing not to hurry. That day, she seemed distant, her gaze more inward than usual, the kind of quiet that isn't peace but retreat. I didn't ask what was wrong. Some truths show up on their own if you don't chase them. We sat longer than usual before she spoke. No greeting, no buffer, just a sentence that seemed to have been waiting on the edge of her throat all morning. "I'm afraid of depending on someone." She said it like a confession, like she expected it to land hard and scatter everything we'd been building. But it didn't. It just settled between us, fragile and honest. I didn't respond right away. I let it breathe. Then, calmly, "Why?" She looked at me like no one had ever asked her that without a lecture already prepared. "Because when people leave," she said, "they don't just go. They take the parts of you that leaned on them, and then you have to learn to walk without pieces you no longer have." She gestured down at her chair, not dramatically, just to say, "I already know something about missing pieces." I nodded, not out of pity, just understanding. "Did someone leave you like that?" I asked, gently. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not just one. It starts with a few small things. People stop calling, they stop inviting. You become a complication in their plans, a detour they don't want to explain. Eventually, they vanish without ever saying they're leaving. They just fade." She paused. "And I started building walls before they could." I didn't tell her I wouldn't fade. Words like that don't mean much when they come too early. Instead, I said, "I don't mind walls. As long as there's a door." That made her smile, barely. "You're not what I expected. I get that a lot." She exhaled, more tension leaving her shoulders than air. Then she said something that struck deeper than anything before. "I don't want to need you." It wasn't rejection. It was fear wearing the mask of caution. I let her have that fear without argument. "You don't have to need me," I said. "I'll still be here." She looked at me for a long time. Really looked. I could see the weight of her doubts pressing against whatever hope she was still protecting. "I don't know how to let people stay," she admitted. "I don't need you to know how. Just don't close the door yet." She nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. Not agreement, but acknowledgement. The first step of something that didn't have to be named yet. That day, she didn't draw. She didn't drink her coffee either. She just sat across from me while the world moved on without asking us for anything. And for the first time, I think she allowed the idea that someone could stay without asking her to give more than she had. It was raining again the next Thursday. Not the quiet drizzle from our first meeting, but a stubborn, sideways kind of rain that made people rush and curse under their breath. I arrived soaked through my jacket, but I didn't complain. The familiar weight of the week had settled in my bones, and I was looking forward to her silence more than anything else. She was already there. Her hair was damp at the ends, and her sleeves were bunched slightly from adjusting her wheels. She looked tired, not the kind that comes from lack of sleep, but the kind that comes from carrying too much alone. I didn't ask what had happened. I just sat down. "You look like the weather," she said. "Then I guess I'm consistent." Her smile was brief. There was something restrained in her that day. She tapped her fingers against her cup but didn't drink. Her sketchbook remained zipped inside her bag. The quiet between us felt heavier, but not uncomfortable. She wasn't shutting me out. She was just elsewhere inside herself. After a while, she asked, "Do you ever feel like you're more work than you're worth?" It wasn't rhetorical. I heard the crack in her voice, subtle, but there. "No," I said honestly, "but I've felt like others thought that about me." She nodded, almost to herself. "That's what I mean. Not that I am too much. Just that people think I am before they even try." She didn't look at me. I think she was afraid to see judgment. She wouldn't have found it. I was too busy admiring the courage it took to say that out loud. "You're not too much," I said. "They're just too little." That made her snort. Not a laugh, just a short, involuntary sound of disbelief. "You always say things like that. Only when they're true." For the first time that afternoon, she relaxed a little. Her shoulders dropped, and her hand stopped fidgeting. The rain outside softened as if it, too, was listening. She didn't say much after that. I didn't need her to. When it was time to leave, she hesitated before reaching for her coat. That small pause told me everything. I knew she didn't want to go back to wherever the heaviness had started. I stood, pulled my umbrella from under the table, and handed it to her. She looked at it, then at me. "You'll get soaked." "I already am." She blinked, caught off guard. "I can't take it." I didn't offer. I left it. She didn't argue again. Just took it, slowly. I could see how much effort it took for her to accept even that small act of care. "Next week?" she asked. "I'll be here." As she wheeled out into the soft grey light, holding the umbrella above her like a quiet shield, I sat back down with my cold coffee and the sound of rain on glass. It was a small thing, maybe just an umbrella, just a Thursday, but something had shifted. Not in the sky, in her, or maybe in me. She didn't come the next Thursday. At first, I thought maybe the rain had kept her in. It was loud again, steady, but not impossible. Still, I waited longer than usual just in case. I nursed the same cup of coffee for an hour, watched the door, listened to conversations that weren't mine. She didn't show. I didn't panic. That's not who I am. But I felt the space she usually filled. It wasn't just the empty table. It was the quiet where her voice should have been, the pause in my thoughts where she used to sit. That night, I didn't text. I wanted to. I even typed something, "Everything okay, son," but deleted it. I didn't want to be one more voice asking something from her. So I waited. The next day passed. Then the weekend. Still nothing. By Monday, I sent a message. Just 3 words. "I'm still here." No question, no pressure. Just an anchor, if she needed one. She didn't respond. I kept going to the cafe on Thursday, and the Thursday after. I'd bring my book. I'd sit in the same seat. I'd order the same coffee. It wasn't about routine anymore. It was about keeping something open, like leaving the porch light on in case someone wants to come home. Then, on the 3rd Thursday, she returned. No umbrella this time, no sketchbook, just her, looking smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in the way someone looks when they've been shrinking inside themselves. She didn't offer an explanation. I didn't ask for one. She sat down slowly, as if the chair wasn't the only thing she was unsure of. "You didn't text," she said. "I didn't want to be more noise." Her eyes flicked up to meet mine. There was something in them I hadn't seen before. Exhaustion, maybe, or relief. "There was a lot of noise," she whispered. I nodded. "Then I'm glad I wasn't part of it." She looked away. "I thought about not coming back." "Why did you?" "Because I couldn't stop thinking about the umbrella." I waited. "You didn't ask for it back. You just gave it like you didn't expect anything, like I didn't owe you." "You don't." A long pause. Then she said, "People don't usually stay when I disappear. They take it personally, or they get tired, or they decide I'm too hard to reach. I don't need to reach you. Just sit near enough when you come back." Her hands tightened on the edge of the table. I was afraid that if I showed up, I'd have to explain. "You don't." She breathed out slowly. Her shoulders slumped, but not from defeat, more like release, like carrying something for too long and finally putting it down. "I didn't mean to disappear," she said. "I know." Silence settled again, softer this time. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the umbrella, my umbrella, folded neatly. She placed it on the table between us without a word. I pushed it back toward her. "Still yours." She looked at it for a long moment, then didn't argue. For the rest of the hour we said very little, but it didn't feel like silence. It felt like an answer. It was her idea. She said it casually, like it didn't matter, like inviting someone into her home wasn't a line she rarely crossed, but the hesitation in her voice betrayed her. I heard it in the half-second pause before she asked, and again in the way she didn't look at me after the words left her mouth. "Would you want to come over? For dinner? Nothing fancy." I didn't ask why. I didn't ask what had changed, or what she was ready for now that she hadn't been before. I just said yes. Thursday came, and I found myself standing in front of her door with a bottle of something I wasn't sure she drank, and a quiet hope I couldn't name. She opened the door slowly, like she was still deciding whether she was really ready. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore a soft grey sweater that looked like it had lived many lives. She didn't apologize for the clutter behind her or the stack of mail on the table. She just let me in. The place was small, lived in. Books stacked in uneven piles. A few framed photos turned slightly askew on the wall. There was a warmth in the space, even if it wasn't trying to impress anyone. "I don't usually cook for people," she said, guiding her chair toward the kitchen. "I don't usually get invited," I replied. She glanced at me, lips twitching at the corners. "Then I guess we're both out of character." The food was simple: pasta, a salad with too much dressing, bread a little over-toasted. It was perfect. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. There was no music playing, no candles, just us, and the quiet sounds of forks against plates, the occasional murmur of water through old pipes. She asked about my family. I told her what I always told people, that we weren't close, not in a dramatic way, just in the slow drifting apart way that life allows when no one fights to hold it together. She didn't press. I think she understood the shape of that silence. I asked about her art. She shrugged. "I haven't drawn anything in weeks." "Why not?" She took a long sip of water before answering. "Because sometimes creating something feels like asking the world to see you, and I haven't wanted to be seen lately." "You let me see." "That's different." "Why?" Her eyes lingered on mine, and for a moment I thought she might lie or change the subject, but she didn't. "Because you don't take. You just stay." That silence afterward felt heavier than anything we'd ever shared. Not painful, just full, like it meant more than either of us could say out loud. After we finished eating, she reached for one of the books on the table and passed it to me. "Open to any page." I did. "Read a sentence at random." She smiled and nodded, like that was enough. Like just choosing a line and speaking it aloud was an act of trust neither of us had expected. We didn't talk about what we were or what this meant. We didn't plan the next step or try to name what was growing between us. But as I stood to leave, she followed me to the door, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. "You coming next week?" she asked. "If you're there." "I will be." Her hand lingered on the doorknob after I stepped outside. She didn't say goodbye, and I didn't need her to. It was a Sunday when she called. She didn't usually reach out first. Hannah preferred to be the one answering, not asking. But that morning, just past 10, her name lit up my phone. The message was brief. "If you're not doing anything, I made too much coffee." There was no question mark, no explanation, just an open door I didn't hesitate to walk through. Her apartment smelled like coffee and something slightly burnt. She waved me in without ceremony, her sweater sleeves pulled over her hands. The light through the windows was soft, as if the day itself knew not to push too hard. "I was trying a new muffin recipe," she said, motioning toward the kitchen counter. "It got away from me." I picked up one of the darker survivors. "Smells like optimism." She rolled her eyes, but there was a smile there. A real one. We didn't sit at the table this time. We settled on the floor near the window, her legs tucked beneath her. The wheels of her chair angled just slightly behind her like an afterthought. She seemed lighter. Not happy, necessarily, but less braced against the world. We talked about nothing for a while. The taste of overbrewed coffee, the worst movies we'd ever loved. Her laugh came easier, and I held onto it every time it broke the quiet. Then, somewhere between stories, she reached for a book on the shelf and knocked something down in the process. It was a photograph. It landed face down on the floor between us. She froze. I reached for it instinctively, but when I turned it over, I paused. It was a picture of her, much younger, standing beside a boy with wide shoulders and a soft expression. They were smiling like the world hadn't disappointed them yet. She didn't speak, just stared at the image like it was something she had meant to forget. "Brother?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, he was more than that. Once." The weight in her voice wasn't bitterness. It was memory wrapped in ache. "You don't have to explain," I said. "I know, but I might anyway." She took the photograph from my hand and held it carefully, her thumb brushing the edge. He left before I understood what leaving really meant. He didn't say goodbye. "Just stop showing up." I didn't interrupt. Some silences need to be heard, not filled. I kept the photo because I needed proof that I wasn't making it up. That once, someone saw me and stayed, until they didn't. She placed the picture face down again. Didn't push it aside, just let it be. "I don't look at it often," she said. "But when I do, I wonder if I've made peace or just gotten used to the absence." I reached for her hand, not abruptly, not like a gesture that asked for anything, just presence, warm and steady. She didn't pull away. "I don't want you to be a photograph," she whispered. "I won't be. Simple, steady, no promises wrapped in poetry, just a truth I meant to keep." We sat there a while longer, her fingers still lightly resting against mine. The fallen photo forgotten between us, not erased, just no longer in the way. The park was quiet that afternoon. It was one of those days where everything felt suspended, like the world had paused just long enough for us to step outside of it. Hannah had suggested the change of scenery. "Let's not do coffee today," she'd said, her voice softer than usual. "Let's just go somewhere." So we did. We found a bench near the edge of a small pond, where ducks drifted without urgency, and the trees whispered without asking for attention. I sat on the bench. She stayed in her chair, angled slightly toward me, but not quite close enough to touch. For a while, we just watched the water. It was the kind of silence I'd learned to value with her, unhurried, unforced. It was presence, not absence. "You know," she said after a long pause, "I used to hate parks. Why? Too many couples, too many people moving forward when I felt stuck." She didn't say it with bitterness, just honesty. "I don't feel stuck with you," she added, almost like an afterthought. I glanced at her. She wasn't looking at me. Her gaze was somewhere past the pond, somewhere I couldn't reach. "I don't see you as stuck," I said. "I know. That's part of the problem." I frowned. "How so?" "Because you see me as more than what I am, and I'm afraid I'll never be able to become that." I didn't respond right away. I let the breeze carry her words between us. Then I said, "I don't see you as something you need to grow into. I see you as someone already whole." She finally looked at me. "I'm not whole. You're here. You show up. That's more whole than most." She blinked, and I saw it. A flicker of something behind her eyes. Not tears. Not quite. Just the tension of someone who wanted to believe but didn't know how. "Do you ever wonder what this is?" she asked. "What we're doing?" "Sometimes. But then I remember I don't need to name something to feel it." She laughed. "Barely. You and your quiet truths. They're the only kind I trust." She was quiet again. Then, slowly, she wheeled herself closer, just enough that the side of her chair brushed the edge of the bench. Her hand settled on her lap, inches from mine. "I hate needing people," she said. "I don't need you to need me." She turned to me, really turned, her eyes clear and searching. "Then why are you still here?" "Because I choose to be. Simple, unearned, unconditional." She didn't answer, just leaned slightly, let her shoulder touch my arm, a gesture so small it could have been missed. But I felt it everywhere. We sat like that until the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long across the grass. Neither of us moved. Neither of us tried to explain what had just settled into place between us. We didn't need to. She brought it up again, the same sentence that had started everything. We were back at the cafe, our table, our hour. The world outside was bright, but she wore that far-away look, the one she saved for moments when her mind wandered somewhere harder. "If I weren't different," she said, "you'd choose me." This time it wasn't a defense, it wasn't sarcasm, it wasn't bitterness. It was a test, a quiet echo of the beginning, spoken not to provoke, but to confirm something she still didn't fully believe. I set down my coffee and met her eyes. I already did. Her gaze didn't falter, but I saw the way her fingers tightened around the cup. "I mean now," she said. "Now that you know me, my silences, my disappearances, the fact that I can't always meet you where you are. I never asked you to. But still, would you?" I leaned back slightly. Not to retreat, just to make room for the moment to settle. She needed this answer, not because she doubted me, but because she doubted herself. "I would choose you again," I said. "Not because of who you might become, because of who you are. The quiet, the weight, the brilliance you try to hide. All of it." Her expression didn't change, but her shoulders softened, like she'd been holding something she didn't realize she could put down. "You don't know how loud that is," she whispered. "I do. I've been listening." She nodded slowly, like she was trying to let herself absorb it. "You know what I fear most?" she asked. "It's not being left. It's being kept by someone who doesn't really see me. Someone who stays out of obligation or pity or habit." I didn't rush to respond. Some fears don't want answers. They want recognition. "I see you, Hannah," I said. "I stay because I want to. No other reason. And if one day I can't give back as much as you do, then I'll still be here. Choosing you doesn't require balance, it just requires truth." She was silent for a long time. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out her sketchbook. I hadn't seen it in weeks. She placed it between us, opened it to a new page. A sketch in progress, rough lines, 2 figures, one on a bench, one beside it. No details, just posture, stillness, closeness. "I started this after the park," she said, "but I couldn't finish it." I looked at the drawing, the way the space between them said more than touch ever could. "Why not?" I asked. I didn't know how to draw someone staying. I looked at her. "So you just did." She didn't speak again, just closed the sketchbook, slid it back into her bag. Then she looked at me with an expression that didn't ask for anything. It simply allowed. That was the moment, not a grand declaration, not a turning point wrapped in fireworks. Just 2 people, choosing each other again in the smallest, truest way. We didn't meet at the cafe that day. She sent a message that morning. "Come find me where the sky meets the ground." I knew where that was. The hill at the far end of the park, the one people passed on their way to more obvious destinations. It wasn't a place for grand views or perfect photos, but it was quiet and high enough to feel like distance from the world. I arrived just before sunset. She was already there, her chair angled toward the horizon, a blanket tucked across her lap, hair tied back loosely, a thermos between her hands. I approached without saying anything, and she didn't turn to look, just shifted slightly, making space beside her. I sat on the grass. For a long time, we watched the light fade together. The clouds thinned, stretched like they were trying to remember how to be weightless. Birds moved overhead in patterns that didn't need explanation. She didn't speak, and neither did I. We'd learned by now how to sit in stillness without needing to fill it. When she finally did speak, it was barely above a whisper. "I used to think people like you didn't exist." I didn't answer. I let her finish. "Someone who doesn't fix, doesn't push, doesn't leave when it's inconvenient." Still, I waited. I didn't think I'd find that, especially not like this. "Like what?" She turned to me then, eyes soft but steady. "Me, the way I am, not after I'd changed, not once I'd become easier. Just as I am." I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I understood. She poured something from the thermos into a small cup and handed it to me. Tea, still warm, still thoughtful. I took it with both hands, careful not to let the moment spill. We didn't talk about the future, not directly. She didn't ask what we were or where this would go, and I didn't offer promises carved into stone. But as the sky darkened and the air turned cooler, something unspoken formed between us, thicker than the silence, deeper than the questions we hadn't asked. At one point, she said, You could leave, you know. No one would blame you. I know, I said. But that's not what I do. She didn't argue. She didn't push back. She just let the words exist between us like stones placed gently in a river. Something to build on. The wind picked up slightly, and she adjusted her blanket without comment. I moved closer, not to warm her, not to save her, but to share the space. She let our shoulders touch. Nothing more. Nothing less. In the distance, the lights of the city began to flicker on one by one, like quiet confirmations that life was continuing without us. And still, we stayed. Not because we had to, because we chose to.